The worst part wasn't being sold. It was realizing why she was chosen. Yara Okoye sat across the glass desk while two men discussed her life as if she were a delayed shipment. The office was clean, quiet, and expensive in a way that never tried to impress. That alone told her this was real. No shouting, no threats, just paperwork and consequences. Her mother couldn't meet her eyes. Her father kept nodding too quickly, as though agreement might shorten the moment. Between them lay a thin folder, photocopies of hospital bills, stamped letters from lenders, a signed acknowledgement of debt. Her sister's name appeared on every page. Yara's did not. Not yet. "This clears the balance," the man across the desk said calmly, sliding a document forward. His Korean accent was light, professional. "Transport will be arranged tonight." Yara understood then. Not everything, but enough. They weren't negotiating her future. They were closing an account. She stood slowly, the chair scraping the floor louder than it should have. No one stopped her. No one needed to. This wasn't a kidnapping. This was consent wrapped in desperation. "You promised it would only be work," she said, not because she believed it, but because silence felt like surrender. The man didn't respond. He simply watched her the way men watch assets, assessing durability, not feelings. Her mother finally spoke. "Your sister will live." That was the sentence meant to end the conversation. Yara nodded once. In the real world, survival always belonged to someone else. The car that took her away was unmarked, black, clean, driven by a man who never checked the mirror. Seoul passed by in clean lines, corporate buildings, neon signs, cafes closing for the night. Life continued because it always did. She wondered how many people were being sold at the same moment, quietly, efficiently, without headlines. They stopped at a private residence overlooking the river. Security opened gates without hesitation. No weapons were visible. That frightened her more than guns ever could. Inside, she was escorted to a waiting room. Tea steamed untouched on a low table. The walls held no art, only space. The absence felt deliberate. Minutes passed, or hours. Time behaved differently in rooms designed for decision-making. Then the door opened. Han Jun-suk did not look like what fear usually imagined. No scars, no raised voice. He wore a tailored suit, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. He didn't look at her immediately. He read the document in his hand first. She noticed what others missed, the stillness. Nothing about him rushed. Men like that didn't chase control, they assumed it. He finally looked up, not at her body, not at her face, at her eyes. "You understand why you're here," he said. "Yes," she replied. It wasn't entirely true, but it was enough. He studied her for another moment, then closed the folder. "You were not chosen at random," he said. "That is the part your parents do not know." Her chest tightened. This wasn't cruelty. This was worse information. "The debt that brought you here was designed," he continued. "Your family was used. You were the leverage." Yara swallowed. "For what?" "For me." The words landed with precision. Before she could respond, the door behind her opened. Several men entered, executives, not guards. They took their seats around a long table, eyes moving between Han and Yara with open confusion. Han stood. "This meeting will be brief," he said. "The asset delivered tonight is no longer collateral." The room shifted. Shoulders straightened. Someone inhaled sharply. "She is my bride." Silence followed. Not disbelief, calculation. Yara felt the ground move beneath her feet, not because she believed the word, but because she understood its weight. This wasn't rescue. This was a declaration, and declarations always had consequences. Power did not argue in Han Jun-suk's world. It observed. The room was older than the building that housed it, paneled walls, muted lighting, a table polished by decades of elbows that had signed death warrants without raising voices. The men seated around it were not soldiers. They were architects, shipping, finance, intelligence, enforcement. Each controlled a piece of the syndicate that made the whole untouchable, and none of them had been warned. Yara felt it immediately. The silence was wrong, not stunned measuring. Han remained standing at the head of the table, one hand resting lightly on the chair he had not yet taken. That alone sent a message. Meetings did not begin until he sat, This one had already begun. "She is your bride?" Chairman Park finally asked, his tone respectful but edged. "This deviates from protocol." Han turned his head slightly. "Just enough. Protocol exists to preserve power," he replied, "not restrict it." No one contradicted him. But several men shifted. That was the first fracture. Yara understood something then. This was not about her safety. It was about precedent. Every move Han made rewrote rules others lived under. She arrived as collateral, another voice added carefully, publicly elevating her altar's balance. Han nodded once. Exactly. That unsettled them more than defiance would have. One of the younger executives leaned forward. "If rivals see sentiment, they will test it." Han's gaze locked onto him. "Then they will fail publicly." The message was clear. "Misinterpret me, and you will be used as an example." Yara stood where she had been placed, half a step behind Han's chair. No one had told her to move. No one had told her to speak. She did neither. Survival required discipline. Chairman Park folded his hands. What is her function? That was the question beneath all others. Han finally sat. "She closes a pipeline," he said calmly. "The debt tied to her family runs through a shell operation financing our eastern rivals. By claiming her, I absorb the liability and expose the channel." Murmurs followed, quiet, sharp. "And if she becomes leverage?" someone asked. Han did not answer immediately. Yara felt it the moment he decided whether to include her as a factor or an object. "She will not," he said, "because she will be visible." Several men frowned. Visibility was dangerous. It invited attack. "That makes her a target," Chairman Park said. Han met his eyes. "Only if someone believes I hesitate." Silence again, this one heavier. Yara realized then that this marriage was not protection. It was placement. She had been positioned deliberately in the line of fire, not to be sacrificed but to force reactions. A man at the far end of the table smiled faintly. "Bold," he said, "but unnecessary." Han looked at him for the first time. "Your division moved funds last quarter without authorization," Han said evenly. "That was unnecessary." The smile vanished. Blood did not need to spill for power to assert itself. Exposure was enough. Han rose again, signaling the meeting's end. "She stays," he said. "Any attempt to move her without my consent will be treated as a declaration." No one asked what kind. As the men stood and filed out, Yara felt eyes on her not with desire, but calculation. Some saw risk, others saw opportunity. A few saw a future problem waiting to happen. When the room finally emptied, Hans spoke without turning. "Understand this," he said. "They will test you not because you matter, but because I chose you." Yara steadied her breath. "And if I fail?" Han paused. "Then I miscalculated," he said, "and I do not do that twice." For the first time, Yara understood the true cost of being claimed by power. It was not ownership, it was expectation. Power rarely announces betrayal. It disguises it as agreement. The man who smiled at the far end of the table was named Kang Min-jae, and he had survived 14 years in Han Jun-suk's organization by mastering one skill, never being the loudest voice in the room. He clapped last, he spoke least, and he never opposed Han directly. That was why he was still alive. As the council dispersed, Min-jae walked out with the others, his expression neutral, his steps unhurried. Cameras tracked him automatically. Security nodded. No one stopped him. Men like him were trusted because they had never given reason not to be. But trust, in the real world, was not built on loyalty. It was built on predictability. Min-jae entered his office and closed the door softly. He did not sit. He did not make a call. He poured a drink he did not intend to finish and stared out at the city like a man admiring order. Han's declaration replayed in his mind. "She is my bride." Too public, too theatrical, too disruptive. Han had always ruled through inevitability, not spectacle. This move created noise, and noise attracted competition. Min-jae understood something the others didn't. The problem wasn't the woman. It was the signal. A claimed woman could be watched. A claimed bride could be tested. Across the compound, Yara was escorted to a private wing. The security there was tighter, not heavier. No shouting guards, no locked chains, just quiet control. cameras embedded in corners, access codes that changed every hour. She noticed everything. What she didn't know was that her presence had already split the room into factions. One faction believed Han's move was brilliant, forcing enemies into visibility. Another believed it was unnecessary risk. Min-jae belonged to a third group, those who believed power should never evolve publicly. He picked up his phone and typed a single encrypted message. The asset is visible. Window opening. No names. No details. That was enough. Back in her room, Yara removed her coat slowly, deliberately. She placed it over a chair instead of dropping it. She had learned something watching the men earlier. Disorder attracted attention. A knock came. Not loud. Not urgent. When she opened the door, Han stood there alone. "You handled the room well," he said. "I didn't speak." "Exactly." He stepped inside without asking. Power did not ask for permission, but it did offer explanation when it mattered. "Some of them will support this," he said. "Some will resent it. And the rest?" she asked. Han looked at her for a long moment. "The rest will test you." Her stomach tightened. "How?" "They will try to move you," he said plainly. "Socially, financially, physically, not all at once." "And you?" she asked. "I will watch who moves first." Yara understood then. She was not just being protected. She was being used as bait. "What happens to the one who tries?" she asked. Han's voice was calm. "He will reveal himself." That night, as Seoul slept under glass and neon, Kang Min-jae stood in his office, watching encrypted confirmations arrive one by one. He did not consider himself a traitor. He considered himself a correction. And corrections, in his experience, always required sacrifice. Unaware of his name, Yara sat on the edge of a bed she did not choose, feeling the first shift in the air, the subtle pressure that came before violence. Something had begun moving, and it was not going to stop. The first move did not come with violence. That was how Yara knew it mattered. It arrived as an invitation. A sealed envelope was placed on the low table in her sitting room while she showered. No knock, no announcement, just paper where there had been none before. When she returned, wrapped in a robe she had not chosen, she stood still and stared at it. Someone had crossed a line quietly. The card inside was heavy, textured, understated, no names, no threats. Dinner, private residence. Tonight, 9 p.m. Attendance advised. Advised was a word people used when refusal carried consequences. Yara sat slowly. She did not call for security. That would announce fear. Instead, she waited. She replayed Han's words from the night before. "They will try to move you." This was not an abduction attempt. It was a reclassification. At precisely 8:45, a driver arrived. Different car, different man, still unmarked. That was the point. Whoever sent this wanted to see if systems would bend. She entered the vehicle willingly. Cameras followed, no alarms sounded. That was worse. The residence was smaller than Han's compound, but older, quiet wealth layered with history. Inside, the air smelled of incense and restraint. Kang Min-jae waited at the table, standing, smiling politely. "Mrs. Han," he said, inclining his head just enough to be respectful. She did not correct him. "You weren't instructed to summon me," Yara said. "No," he replied easily. "I took initiative." Initiative was a dangerous word in hierarchies built on permission. Dinner was served by staff who avoided eye contact. No weapons were visible, none were needed. "I wanted to meet you without noise," Min-jae said, pouring wine she did not touch. "Some of the council believes your presence destabilizes balance." "And you?" she asked. "I believe balance is flexible," he said. "People, less so." Said. There it was. "Han Jun-sok is powerful," Min-jae continued. "But even power benefits from options." Yara felt the pressure now, not force, but direction. "You're offering me one," she said. "I'm offering you protection," he corrected. "Visibility attracts danger. I can make you quieter." "By moving me," she said. "By redefining you," he said smoothly. "Away from public declaration, into discretion." Yara understood then. This was not betrayal yet. This was testing the boundary. If she agreed even passively, it would prove Han's claim was negotiable. She stood. "You invited me without authority, she said calmly. That's not protection, that's a measurement. Min-jae's smile tightened for half a second. Just enough. You're clever, he said. But clever women often mistake confidence for safety. Yara met his eyes. And careful men mistake access for control. Silence stretched. Outside, engines started too many to be coincidence. Min-jae realized it at the same moment she did. Han Jun-seok stepped into the room, coat still on, eyes unreadable. I told you, Han said quietly. Any attempt to move her would be treated as a declaration. Min-jae did not plead. He did not deny. That would have insulted them both. I was ensuring stability, he said. Han looked at Yara not to check her fear, but her choice. Did he offer you safety? Han asked. Yes, she replied. And did you accept? No, that answer sealed it. Han turned back to Min-jae. Then you miscalculated. What followed was not loud. It was not public. But by morning, Kang Min-jae's division would no longer exist as an independent structure. As Yara left with Han, she understood the truth fully now. The first move had been made. She had survived it. But survival was no longer enough. She had just become part of the game. Power never ends with the act. It ends with the reaction. By morning, Kang Min-jae's office lights were off. Not because he was gone yet, but because his authority was. No announcements were made. No bodies were displayed. That was deliberate. Han Jun-seok understood something most men didn't. Fear lasted longer when it was quiet. Yara learned what happened the way people always learned the truth in this world, through absence. The finance director who used to pass her in the East Corridor didn't show up. The logistics head who had once stared too long at her during a meeting sent a message resigning for health reasons. Entire divisions froze operations, waiting for instructions that didn't come. Markets noticed. Ports slowed. A bank in Busan quietly suspended a line of credit. The syndicate didn't panic. It recalculated. At breakfast, Han read reports without comment. Yara sat across from him, untouched food cooling between them. She had slept, but not deeply. Silence had weight now. It pressed into her chest. They're adjusting, she said finally. Yes, Han replied. And watching. For what? To see if the rules still hold. She absorbed that. And do they? Han looked at her then. Not testing, measuring alignment. They will, he said, because I won't explain them twice. By noon, a council session was called not in the formal room, but in smaller groups, fragmented, strategic. Han did not attend all of them. He didn't need to. His absence reminded them who decided relevance. Yara was not invited to any. That was also intentional. Instead, she was escorted through operational spaces, shipping floors, data rooms, security hubs, not as a tour, as exposure. She wasn't being taught details, she was being shown scale. You want them to see me here, she said quietly as they walked. Yes. Why? Because silence after disruption creates stories, Han replied. Stories create ambition, and ambition creates mistakes. A pause, then. Exactly. That afternoon, the first mistake surfaced. A mid-level enforcement chief attempted to relocate assets tied to Min-jae's division too quickly, too cleanly, a grab disguised as stabilization. He assumed chaos provided cover. Han watched the move complete. Then he reversed it, not violently, administratively. Accounts were frozen, access revoked. The man was not arrested. He was summoned. When he entered the room, Han didn't raise his voice. You mistook speed for permission, Han said. I was protecting the organization, the man replied. No, Han corrected. You were protecting opportunity. The punishment was not death. That would have been dramatic. Instead, the man was reassigned to a peripheral role with no decision authority, alive, visible, reduced. That frightened the room far more. Later, Yara asked, why let him live? Han answered without hesitation. Because survival without influence is a warning. By evening, the message had settled into the bones of the syndicate. No one moved without clarity. No one spoke without alignment. And no one mentioned Kang Min-jae's name. Yara stood on the balcony that night, overlooking Seoul's lights. She thought of how close she had come to being shifted quietly, politely out of position. You could have stopped it earlier, she said when Han joined her. Yes, why didn't you? Because systems reveal themselves under pressure, he said. And so do people. She turned to face him. Including me. Han met her gaze. Especially you. The truth settled heavily between them. She was no longer just a trigger for conflict. She was a test for loyalty, restraint, and ambition, and tests always produced casualties. Somewhere in the city, Kang Min-jae waited, still breathing, still calculating, unaware that the aftershocks had already erased him. Power had moved on, and it would not circle back. Mistakes in Han Jun-sok's world were not loud, they were polite. Yara made hers on a Tuesday. It began with a message routed through 3 intermediaries, sanitized, careful, almost respectful, a request for 5 minutes, no threats, no urgency, just a name she recognized, Ji-woon. A junior analyst, barely visible, one of the people displaced when Kang Min-jae's division collapsed. She hesitated. Since the aftershocks, Yara had learned how people watched her not openly, but with calculation. She represented proximity to power, and proximity attracted desperation. She should have ignored the message. Instead, she answered. They met in a transitional space between buildings, glass corridor, cameras active, security present but distant, public enough to feel safe. That was the illusion. Ji-woon bowed too deeply. His hands shook. They say I'm being reassigned, he said quickly, but reassignment here means disappearance. That depends, Yara replied carefully, on what you did. Nothing, he said. I just belonged to the wrong structure. That was true, and incomplete. Yara thought of Min-jae's calm smile, of how entire divisions vanished without bloodshed, of Han's certainty that restraint frightened people more than violence. She made an assumption. What are you asking? She said. Ji-woon swallowed. Intercession, not forgiveness, just delay, delay. The most dangerous word in systems built on momentum. I don't have authority, Yara said. But you have access, he replied. That's enough. She should have walked away. Instead, she listened. That night, she mentioned Ji-woon casually at dinner. One of the analysts from Min-jae's division reached out, she said. He's afraid. Han did not look up from his plate. Fear is common, he said. Action is not. He claims he did nothing wrong. Han paused then. Not long. Just enough. Everyone in a collapsing structure did something wrong, he said. They stood where they were. Yara pressed on. He's young, peripheral. Han set his fork down. This is not mercy, he said calmly. This is interference. The word landed heavier than anger would have. I'm not asking you to save him, she said. Just delay, Han finished. You want time to feel better about inevitability. Silence followed. Yara realized too late what she had done. She had not challenged his authority, but she had blurred his signal. In a system recalibrating after betrayal, clarity was survival. Han stood. I will handle it, he said. That should have ended it. It didn't. The next morning, Ji-woon disappeared. Not reassigned. Not demoted. Gone. No records. No whispers. Even absence had been erased. Yara felt it immediately, the shift. Not guilt. Responsibility. That evening, Han found her standing alone in the sitting room. You moved something that was not yours, he said. I didn't know. You knew enough, he interrupted. His voice was still calm. That was worse. They will interpret your request as influence, he continued. And influence as weakness. Her chest tightened. So he's dead because I spoke? Han did not answer immediately. No, he said finally. He is gone because someone believed your concern created a window. The distinction mattered. And didn't. You don't save people here, Han said. You place them. She met his eyes. Then what am I? He studied her for a long moment. You are no longer invisible, he said. And you are no longer protected from consequence. That night, Yara understood the truth fully. Her earlier survival had been passive. This mistake was active. She had stepped into the machinery and it had moved around her. From this point forward, she would not be tested as collateral. She would be judged as part of the structure. And structures do not forgive error. They absorb it or collapse. The first sign did not come as an attack. It came as a rumor. By midday, Shipping manifests were delayed at 2 ports. Nothing dramatic, no seizures. Just enough friction to be noticed by people who watched numbers for a living. By evening, a foreign exchange desk in Singapore flagged an irregular inquiry tied to a shell company Han had shut down months earlier. Someone was testing doors that should have stayed closed. Han read the report once and set it aside. "They've smelled blood," he said. Yara did not ask who they were. She already knew. Power vacuums were never empty for long. Someone always waited just beyond visibility, patient enough to let others weaken themselves. "This is about Jiwoon," she said quietly. "It's about perception," Han replied. "Your mistake told them 2 things." She waited. "1," he continued, "that you matter." That surprised her. "And 2," he added, "that you can be reached." That frightened her. By nightfall, the message arrived. Not to Han, to Yara. It came through a channel she had never used, an international number routed through Lagos, then Hong Kong, then Seoul. Whoever sent it wanted her to notice the path. "You don't belong where you are. We can correct that." No signature, no threat, an offer. She deleted the message immediately, but deletion did not undo receipt. Han knew within minutes. "They're not negotiating with me," he said. "They're bypassing me." "Because of me," Yara replied. "Yes," he said, "because of you." For the first time, she heard something else beneath his certainty, not doubt, but recalculation. The rival syndicate did not strike openly. That would have unified Han's people. Instead, they targeted reputation. Questions surfaced in quiet circles. Is Han compromised? Is the bride a vulnerability? Men who had survived by sensing shifts began adjusting their loyalties in fractions, delaying responses, withholding enthusiasm, watching closely. That was how empires cracked. The next move came publicly. A charity gala in downtown Seoul. Legitimate, polished, televised. Han rarely attended such events. This time, he did. And he brought Yara. Visibility again, but sharper. Cameras followed them as they entered her in black, controlled, deliberate. His presence alone altered the room's temperature. Applause followed. Smiles hid calculations. Halfway through the evening, a man approached Yara while Han spoke with donors. Polite, Western suit, African accent. "You should leave," he said softly, passing her a glass she did not accept. "This room isn't safe for women used as leverage." She met his eyes. "And you are?" "A correction," he replied with a faint smile. "Like the one you tried to make." The words were precise. Too precise. Before she could respond, he stepped away, vanishing into the crowd without urgency. Minutes later, news alerts began lighting phones across the room. A container fire. A port seizure. A leaked document tying Han's organization to an operation that had been buried years ago. The gala continued. Music played, laughter echoed. But the message was clear. "We can reach you anywhere." Han read the alerts without expression. When he finally looked at Yara, there was no accusation in his eyes, only decision. "They want you afraid," he said, "or separated." "And if I am?" she asked. "Then they win," he replied. Security closed ranks as they exited. Outside, Seoul glowed as if nothing had shifted. But something had. The rival syndicate had stepped into the open not with violence, but with precision. They had announced themselves by touching what Han had declared untouchable. Yara understood then the true cost of her mistake. It hadn't weakened Han directly. It had given his enemies a narrative, and narratives were more dangerous than guns. As the car pulled away, Han spoke once more. "This ends one of 2 ways," he said. "Either they take you from me," he paused, "or they learn why that is impossible." Yara did not look away. For the first time, she was no longer reacting to power. She was standing in its path. Alignment is not loyalty. It is exposure by choice. The safe option arrived first. It came disguised as protection, quiet, efficient, and reasonable. A second message routed through cleaner channels than the last, this time carrying specifics. Addresses, times, assurances. You will not be harmed. You will not be followed. You will not be missed. Yara read it twice. This was not a threat. It was an exit plan designed by people who understood how fear worked on intelligent women. No drama, no violence, just removal. She closed the phone and sat still. From the balcony, Seoul looked unchanged. Traffic flowed, lights pulsed. Somewhere below, people argued over prices, over love, over small freedoms that did not require strategy. She could leave. And if she did, the narrative would write itself. Han Jun-sok overreached. His bride became his weakness. That story would spread faster than any retaliation. Han found her there later, jacket still on, attention divided between screens and thought. He did not ask what she was holding. He already knew. "They'll try again," he said. "They won't stop until the question is answered." "Which question?" she asked. "Whether you are movable." The words settled between them. Yara turned to face him. "If I stay, they escalate." "Yes. And if I go, they consolidate." Silence followed. "Either way," she said slowly, "you're tested." Han studied her, searching not for fear but fracture. "You can leave," he said. "Not permission. Statement. Tonight." She nodded. "I know." That was the moment. Not when she decided, but when she understood the cost of deciding. "If I disappear quietly," she said, "they win without firing a shot." "Yes. And if I stay," she continued, "I become the point of pressure." Han did not interrupt. "They'll target me," she said. "Socially, reputationally, maybe worse." "Yes." Yara exhaled. "Then I want visibility." That caught him. "Not protection," she added. "Placement." Han's eyes sharpened. "Tomorrow," she said, "I attend the logistics summit in your place." "That is not symbolic," he replied. "That is exposure." "That's the point," she said. "They think I'm a liability. Let them see what I align with." Han considered it. "Not emotionally, structurally." "They'll test you publicly," he said. "And if you fail, they won't blame me," she finished. "They'll blame your judgment." "Yes." She met his gaze. "I accept that." That was the moment she crossed from relevance to risk. The next day, cameras caught her arrival alone. No arm to hold, no shadow behind her, just controlled movement and deliberate stillness. Whispers followed her through the hall. Executives watched with interest that bordered on hunger. During a panel break, the same man from the gala approached again. "You should have left," he said softly. She didn't slow. "You should have stayed hidden." His smile faded. By the time Han arrived late, deliberate, the damage was already done. Messages had been sent, positions taken, reactions locked. Yara stood beside him as reports filtered in, rival assets exposed, false narratives collapsing under scrutiny, a premature move revealing too much. Han looked at her not with approval, but recalculation. "They moved early," he said. "Because they thought I was alone," she replied. He nodded once. That night, the rival syndicate lost more than ground. They lost timing. Yara sat later, exhaustion settling into her bones, knowing something irreversible had happened. She had not escaped the game. She had entered it knowingly, and power, once acknowledged, did not let go gently. Tomorrow would not be quieter, but it would be clearer. Consequence never arrives loudly. It arrives decided. The strike came before dawn. Not an explosion, not gunfire. Those were signals for the public. This was quieter, more precise. 3 financial nodes froze simultaneously. 2 shell companies collapsed under regulatory pressure that should not have existed yet. A port authority reversed a clearance that had already been approved. Someone had moved early, and someone had moved too far. Han stood in the operations room, jacket off now, sleeves rolled back. Screens glowed across the walls, numbers shifting, access points closing like doors in a corridor. "They're forcing confrontation," one of the directors said. "If we respond openly." "We won't," Han interrupted. Yara stood just behind him, present by choice. No one questioned it now. Her presence no longer disrupted the room, it anchored it. "They believe visibility means vulnerability," Han continued, "so we remove their shadows." Orders went out, not shouted, not rushed. Precision unfolded. Legal pressure here, media exposure there. A long-buried rivalry quietly reignited inside the opposing syndicate's own structure. The rival leader panicked. That was the mistake. By mid-morning, the message arrived direct this time. This can still end cleanly. Send her. Yara read it herself. She handed the phone to Han without comment. That's their last play, he said. If I refuse, they escalate publicly. And if you accept? She asked. They gain leverage they can't afford to use, he replied. Silence settled. This was the moment stories usually lied about, the moment of rescue, or sacrifice, or dramatic confession. None of that happened. Han turned to her. You can still leave. Not strategy, not test, truth. If you stay, he continued, this ends with blood. Not yours, but it will be tied to you. Yara did not hesitate. Hesitation was for people who believed safety still existed. If you hand me over, she said, your power becomes conditional. Yes, and if you don't, they will fracture, he said, but not cleanly. She nodded. Then don't. That was it. No oath, no romance, just alignment. Han gave the final order. The response was immediate. The rival syndicate's internal channels flooded with contradictions. Accusations surfaced, some true, some planted, all believable. A senior lieutenant attempted to defect and was intercepted. Another moved assets too late and exposed himself. By nightfall, violence broke out not between syndicates, but within theirs. That was the real consequence of miscalculation. From a secured location, Yara watched updates scroll across the screen. She did not flinch. She had learned the cost of looking away. This ends tonight, Han said. And it did. By morning, the rival syndicate no longer functioned as a single entity. Leadership scattered, assets frozen, alliances dissolved. No victory announcement followed. None was needed. Power did not celebrate. It stabilized. Later, when the city returned to its rhythm, Han and Yara stood together in silence. You chose exposure, he said. Most people choose escape. Escape only delays consequence, she replied. He studied her, not as an asset, not as leverage, as something more dangerous. From now on, he said, they won't test you. Why? Because you stayed when leaving was safer. She absorbed that. The weight of permanence. She had not been saved. She had not been spared. She had been integrated. As the lights of Seoul flickered back into normalcy, Yara understood the final truth of the world she now stood in. Power does not protect what it loves. It protects what it cannot afford to lose. And tonight, she had crossed that line. Here were no announcements after, no celebration, no headlines. The city adjusted the way cities always did, quietly, efficiently, without memory. The syndicate stabilized. Names disappeared from circulation. Routes reopened under different signatures. Order returned. Yara noticed the change in small things. No one watched her to measure risk anymore. They watched to understand position. She no longer required escorts in every room. She no longer received invitations disguised as threats. One evening, weeks later, she stood beside Han Jun-suk overlooking the river. There was no tension in the air now, only distance earned and settled. You could have left, he said. I stayed, she replied. That was all that needed saying. She had not been rescued. She had not been spared. She had been recognized. In a world ruled by consequence, that was the only ending that lasted. If this story held your attention, like the video, subscribe if you value stories built on power, consequence, and realism, not shortcuts. And leave a comment with one word, stayed or left. Your answer says more than you think. Share this with someone who understands that not all endings are loud. Some are final.